very familiar with and known for, is when we raise the question of police brutality or excessive force. It would seem to me that it is not too much to ask that if we hire people to protect us, pay them, and in fact empower them, that we would expect that they would be accountable to the law that they are hired to uphold. We are not anti-police. In fact, we need police. In fact, in communities of color, we need police more than other communities because, unfortunately, crime is higher. But we do not need the police to become above the law or act in a criminal way. So when a Sean Bell is sitting in a car, leaving a bachelor's party on the day of his wedding, and police thought he had a gun and shoot in the car 50 times and kills him and wounds his two friends, and there is no gun found in the car and no reasonable threat to those officers, and we begin to nonviolently march down the street saying that you cannot have police having the right to do that, we are called troublemakers. Like police shooting wrongly at someone is not trouble. Now, you can agree or disagree with us on a position, but to label people troublemakers because they're bothered with 50 shots, one policeman shot, emptied his gun, reloaded, and shot and shot all his bullets out again, and you don't think that is even worthy of questioning? Or Amadou Diallo, some years before, 10 years ago now, shot 41 times in his foyer because when he reached for his wallet, police that had ran up behind him thought he was reaching for a gun. They were wrong, kill him, and we supposed to say, oh, we don't question that. I think it is a bit much to ask people to do that, and I think that what people ought to remember is that all of these marches were absolutely nonviolent protests. So the question is then, if you don't want people to protest peaceably and nonviolently, are you asking people to just shut up and not have an opinion at all? When we had the Sean Bell March, December of '07, 50,000 people marched down Fifth Avenue the Saturday before Christmas and not one window broke. Contrast that with Oakland a few weeks ago, since Obama's election, where police cars were turned over 3 or 4 days of violence. It was clear to me that if you have nonviolent, skilled activists, they will know how to express the outrage and mobilize the crowd to raise the issue without being destructive in the process. That, to me, is as important as anyone critiquing that we are disturbing them because we raise a question of injustice. The same with the Gina 6 case, as mentioned in the introduction. I was called by a mother who said her son was in jail because he got in a fight with some students in his high school over a hangman noose hanging in front of Gina High School in Gina, Louisiana. I had never heard of Gina, Louisiana. I said, I can't understand what you mean he's in jail for that. There were 6 young blacks that had been charged as adults for attempted murder because there was a tree in front of Gina High School that blacks traditionally were not allowed to sit under. When one black said, I'm going to sit under the tree, it caused a major fracas in the school. They ended up having fights over a series of weeks with guns pulled and back and forward. The 6 black kids were indicted as adults, charged with attempted murder. One of the white kids was charged with a minor misdemeanor as a juvenile. When I went to Gina and asked why this was the case, they said that we were outside agitators, which was some language that comes out of the 50s and 60s. When we addressed the federal government and said, how can you not deal with the hate crime of a tree that blacks can't sit under and a hangman noose that is there, they said we can't charge white kids with the hate crime that did this because they're minors. I said, well, let me then ask one more question. If the whites that hung the noose cannot be prosecuted because they're minors. And the blacks that were in the fight with them are charged as adults for attempted murder. And they all are the same age. Explain to me how one is minors and the other adults. They couldn't, which is what led to the big march in Gina. And we were able to get the appellate court in Louisiana to lower the charges and successfully walked Michael Bell out of jail. These are not things that occurred 20 years ago, 30 years ago. This was last year in Gina, Louisiana. Sean Bell 2 years ago. Oakland 2 months ago. Many people say to me, Reverend Sharpton, I was not alive for this great civil rights movement, so I can't identify with that. And I say to them, what are you talking about? They say, well, I'm too young to have been in Selma or Birmingham or any of the great civil rights marches of Dr. King. And my response is, so am I. And I'm much older than you, but I was too young to go to Selma, Birmingham, or the March on Washington. But none of us were too young to know what happened in Katrina or Gina or police brutality or today at a local school or today when we see the institutional gap based on gender and race in health care and in the criminal justice system and in economics. So the question is, do we have the will to close the gap, or do we just want symbolic victories that we are not willing to follow up with substance? I think the challenge is that we must follow up the greatest symbolic victory of our country in these areas with the greatest substantive follow-up to make a reality what Barack Obama has laid out for this country. I think it will take some of us on the outside of government, and I think it will take some of us on the inside in order to make it happen. If students today were committed to a social justice agenda around protecting everyone's rights and on having an equality that goes institutionally across the board in this country, then they can finish the great promise that November 4th election showed. But if they don't, if we go into some era of denial and acting like we've already arrived because we've started a journey and not ended it, then I think that we will have forfeited an opportunity to achieve real greatness and make America live up to its promise. Every generation had to choose what was unpopular and uncharted and achieve that to become the great generation that they became. The challenge of this generation is that we've stepped into an uncharted water for change, and we've shaken the world and given the world hope. The question is whether this generation will follow up its own step and finish the journey that it began. I would encourage you to not duplicate or imitate those of us that have been out here. Do it your way. Do it better. Disagree. Critique. Say this shouldn't be or that shouldn't be. This won't work, that will. But whatever you do, don't sit by and justify leaving things the way they are. I think that part of the problem with leadership in this country is they want people to be their clones rather than their co-workers. You do not need to duplicate those of us that are out here. You need to find your own style, your own way, your own constituency, and move the nation forward. That is what leadership is. That's how those that are leading now got there. That's how you should get there. But you should ask yourself, what are the higher purposes and challenges of these times that I'm involved in? Is your study, is your being here in this institution all about you accumulating some personal status and personal wealth, or is part of it committed also to a higher calling of the great challenges of your generation? Don't get me wrong, you should be as successful as you can personally, achieve great stature, achieve financial security, but put some fraction of your life aside to participate in the great challenges and the great causes and issues of your day. Because later in life, those that come behind you will be more curious about what you did with the challenges of your time than what you achieved in your own self-aggrandizement. I've never asked my mother how much money she had in the bank when she was in Alabama growing up. I did ask her whether she was ever involved in the Freedom Rides or in the boycott of Rosa Parks. My children are not impressed with whatever I have or don't have materially because they hope to make more and take mine when I'm gone anyway. They are more concerned about whether I'm going to be involved in the great issues that will shape their lives. Don't waste your life by only living it for yourself. The only way your life will have meaning is if you have a fraction of your life committed to more than you. I can tell you as a clergyman that, and we are in a church building, though this is not a church service, I can tell you as a clergyman that one of the most difficult tasks one can find themselves in is to find themselves preaching the funeral of an irrelevant person. It is a hard job. They roll the body down the center aisle, lay it out in front of some altar, and we are asked to get up and hallucinate the life that we just lost, that did not matter and did none of what we talked about. It is a very difficult thing to make up someone's relevance and to fabricate someone's contribution. So as a clergyman, I beg you, do not do that to someone. Don't make someone at the end of your journey have to fabricate that you were relevant or hallucinate that your passing this way even mattered. Do something that at the end of life, people can say this is what you stood for, this is what you were part of, and because of you, the world is a better place and the country is a better place. That is why I end the way I began. It is not to me about how many like you or dislike you. It's about knowing when you lay your head on a pillow at night that the challenges of your time, you were part of trying to face them, that what took courage you tried to stand for, you lived by what you believed and you made a difference. If you can go to sleep at night saying that, doesn't matter how many critics you have or supporters. What matters is that you're content and fulfilled within yourself, that your coming through life was not a waste of time. Had I been in another generation and another era, I would have had to deal with those issues. But I'm not there, I'm here in this time. And there are still issues that remain unresolved. History tells me they will not resolve themselves. It will take those that will take risk and courage, that will call for their resolution. Without that calling, that resolution won't come. With that calling, that those resolutions are inevitable, even if it's at the expense of the popularity of those that make the call. Thank you, and God bless you. Thank you. We're going to take questions. I guess you'll tell them how to do that.
So we have a few minutes lined up for Q&A. If everyone who has a question could line up in the back of the chapel, and then, great, and then proceed to the mic down in the center. Thank you.
Hello. Good night, Reverend Al Sharpton. My name is Mona. I'm also from Brooklyn. But
I can't hear you.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry. Good night. My name is Mona Corliss. I'm also from Brooklyn, New York. I had two questions. My first one was, what is your advice to students who come to a different setting and you meet other students and you feel like they've been very complacent in where they've been as far as making change? And how do you feel students should address that complacency without being seen as like a rebel rouser or, getting under people's skin, at the same time not becoming apathetic and getting into that kind of attitude where they feel like, I've done what I can, I'm lifting my hands?
Well, I mean, it's kind of awkward for me to be asked how to not come off like a rabble rouser, but I'll try. I think that, one, you have to try and understand what is the basis of their complacency and address that. I think most people don't see themselves as complacent, and most people are comfortable where they are because they feel like they are all right. And I think you've got to find ways that you can communicate to them that they're not all right, and that if we don't make certain moves, things will not change. When I was much younger, I would beat them down, call them names, and you find out that you will alienate more than you will bring forward, though sometimes now I'm tempted to do the same. I think that you can do it by explaining and showing, and then finding ways to gradually move at their pace to try to get them involved. Because I don't think people understand, as I think the president says rightly, the urgency of the moment. And I think that you've got to explain it and show it to them. Most people, as they understand that, will move. Some are hopeless cases, but most people are not.
Thank you. My name is Stephen Tatum. I'm from Vermont.
You're from?
Vermont. I was wondering, you said in the beginning that it was the job of an activist to sort of bring issues out in the open. And I was wondering pragmatically what you think the best way to do that is exactly. Last month I studied Gandhi and was rather taken with his Satyagraha movement in India. And I was just sort of wondering.
I think that the art of exposing issues, first of all, it should be based on who the person is. So you've got to, like, if you study Gandhi, Gandhi was probably the best in the world, but he also did it based on who he was. He had very firm beliefs, spiritual beliefs. He had some very firm disciplines. So you can't impose disciplines and faith and style on people that is not there. For example, I studied Gandhi in my early civil rights days, but I couldn't walk around Brooklyn in a loincloth. It just wouldn't have worked, and it wasn't my style exactly. So I think that you can learn from other activists, but you must acclimate it to your environment, your person, and what works. Now, sometimes a march might expose an issue, sometimes a rally, sometimes a press conference, sometimes a petition drive. It varies according to what is required. I would not get caught up in an absolute that this is the way we do all the time. I would do what is required to bring attention to that. I'll give you an example. In the Diallo movement of '97, when Amadou Diallo was killed by police in New York, we started civil disobedience at one police plaza where every day we would nonviolently go and lay in front of the police headquarters and go to jail to say to the world, if people would go to jail, there must be something wrong. And before 13 days was out, we had former mayors, members of Congress, Susan Sarandon, Academy Award winner, going to jail. Well, that was one level of keeping it out there. But we didn't do that with Abner Lawima. We did something else. Or with Gina, just bringing 30,000 people to a city that only had 5,000 was enough. So I think you have to adjust it based on the situation and the environment. But in everything, I would advise you always do you. Do not imitate others, because you will soon get tired of that. If you do you, if you become known as your own personality by being yourself, you never have to worry about being uncovered because you're not pretending to be something that you're not.
Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Ben Wessel. I'm from Washington, D.C. I want to thank you for coming to try and inspire this room because I know there's so much potential in here, and I'm really excited if you've excited a lot of people in here. My question is actually sort of similar as the last gentleman's. I'm about to participate in my first direct action civil disobedience next month, and I'm nervous because I sense that there's a lot of allies in Congress and in the White House now, and I don't want them to get the wrong message that I'm not supportive of them. But I do think that they're not going strong enough on addressing the inequalities and injustices in our world. So how do you sort of balance those two issues? Because I know you have a lot of experience.
I think that the challenge is that you have to communicate to them that I'm doing this because I want to see you more aggressive and I want to encourage you. I'm not here to condemn you, but I'm here to encourage you to even be more forceful, and so you could say to those that are adversarial to us that people are very anxious about this. If anything, you're giving them a reason to argue to their colleagues why action must take place. So many times I will find myself saying to people that I agree with, but I think that they are too slow and too docile, that I'm doing this to help you argue our case better in the Senate or congressional conference room. So if they see the outrage outside, they would rather talk to you and deal with it than have to deal with the outrage outside.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Matt, and I'm a New Yorker, fellow New Yorker. I said a question about something you talked about during your speech. It was a main theme. You talked about being an activist in a positive way and use multiple examples. You have experience going out and leading marches for injustices when people are killed and police brutality and things of that sort. But I was wondering if you could talk about the events that went on during like the Crown Heights riots and being an effective leader in a way that doesn't create violence. What would be good strategies in the light of what happened there?
Did you read the Crown Heights report?
Yeah, parts of it. I'm not a scholar on the subject. It's a question that
No, but I'm saying, if you read the Crown Heights report, one of the distortions, I read one of the papers, I'm glad you raised it. There was, the Crown Heights, for you that don't know, there was a young man killed when an ambulance lost control that was carrying the Rebbe in Crown Heights, who was over the Hasidic Jewish sect. And the young man was killed, and people started rioting that night because they said the Rebbe should have been arrested and this young man was killed. The next night, there was riots.
Right.
Now, if you read the Crown Heights report, I was never called in by the family till the third day. And so the whole distortion in your local paper here that I led the Crown Heights riots, I wasn't even there until the third day. I did his eulogy 6 days later, and I led the only nonviolent march that week. If I had incited the riot, one, not only would have been against what I believe in, I would have been indicted. That's a federal offense. So I think that whoever wrote that in whatever propaganda, they would have to explain why the Crown Heights report said, in writing, this is Cuomo's report, no fan of mine, that none of the activists, there was any evidence that they had any knowledge or any involvement in the violence. So therefore, I couldn't answer your question because I wasn't there for that.
I was just asking that in the light of violence happening, in light of trying to do the right thing and say things.
I think you've got to
when you have a community as
I think you could condemn it. I'll give you the best example. In 1991, there was a killing in Bensonhurst, New York, which is right around the time of Crown Heights. And a young man, Yusuf Hawkins, was killed for being in that neighborhood. We marched out there for 29 weeks. People throwing watermelons at us, called the N-word, no violence. The last week, a man stabbed me 2 inches from my heart. You remember that?
Yes.
I went to court and asked the judge not to put him in jail because I said that he deserves a second chance to redeem himself. They put him in jail anyway. I visited him in jail. He wrote me the 9 years he did in jail. He got married in jail, and we stay in touch. But that didn't make the local paper here because that's not the image some right-wingers want to give. If there ever is an example of being against violence is when you yourself are a victim of violence and you go to court and forgive the guy. But again, people would rather fabricate I knew something about violence at Crown Heights than deal with the fact that when I was stabbed, I not only forgave the guy, I went to court and asked the judge to send him home. That's how, to answer your question, that's how I deal with violence.
Thank you.
Reverend Sharpton, first of all, thank you for coming all this way. My name is Annie. I'm from Jersey. And my question was, you made a really important and interesting distinction between activists, advocates, and politicians. So why did you run for president?
I ran for president as an activist. I would tell you, between you and I and everybody in this room, I never thought I was going to be president. I felt that I could use the presidential run to bring into the debates issues that would not have been raised. At that time, the war, the voting rights violation I felt that had happened in Florida, and some of the continued civil rights violations that was going on. And that's why I entered the race. President Obama entered the race to win and won. And there were others, I'm sure Edwards entered the race to run. I entered the race to use it as a platform for advocacy. I never had any illusions that I was going to win.
Thank you.
I totally agree with you that we need to continue to push Congress and President Obama if we want to see any meaningful change under this administration. Would you have any concrete or specific suggestions for things for college students like us going to school in a small town to do? We can't really go down to the courthouse in New York City and lie down and do civil disobedience. What do you think we could do in this environment?
I think that students like you can get online and do online messages en masse to the White House and the Congress supporting certain things. I think the same way colleges mobilize to get people registered and get out to vote for Obama, they need to register online with all kinds of chain emails and all to support a lot of his efforts and to let him know that we're watching. We want him to be accountable. The same way you never left the campuses and helped to change America, you need to hold America accountable.
I'm Hillary. I'm from New York City, and I'd like to know what you think of the RNC's new chairman.
Well, Michael Steele, the RNC's new chairman, I know Michael Steele. He's a likable guy, but he is a conservative Republican. Let's not forget, when Michael Steele ran for governor of Maryland, Karl Rove and others helped his campaign. He's going to support policies that are not policies that I agree with. He's going to try and bring some, particularly the black church, over into the Republican Party based on right to life and anti-gay legislation, and I intend to be there to resist him. Is he a nice guy? Yes. Is he cordial? Yes. Will I smile while we fight him? Yes, but fight him we will.
Thank you and good luck.
Hello, I'm William Peterson from Washington State, and you spoke briefly about Dr. King's description of leaders as being either thermostats or thermometers, and I was wondering which, in your opinion, is President Obama, and how might this change what we should expect to see from him over the next 4 years?
I think that he's a politician that has been a thermometer that has a thermostat agenda, because if he had not been, he couldn't have been elected, and he will tell you that. But I think that he wants to change the tone. I think that we can hope that he is able to convince his party leaders to help him do that. And again, he and I don't agree on everything. I'm sure I'm further to the left than him on a lot of issues. But if he just holds to what he said, it would make such a transformation in this country. The problem is, can he get the Democrats in the Senate and the Congress not to dilute a lot of what he has laid out and what is the basis of the change that people voted for. And that's going to be why he's going to need a lot of outside help.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mike from New Jersey, and you mentioned No Child Left Behind and education issues with regards to both funding and assessment. What do you see, given the widely held perception that No Child Left Behind has been a failure, as the future of government initiative with regards to education?
Well, I think that's a good question. We had National Action Network, the organization I lead, we had a forum on Dr. King's Day in Washington, the day before the inauguration, and we invited everyone from Newt Gingrich and McCain to the Democrats. I think that there are some aspects of No Child Left Behind in terms of achievement gap closing, in terms of performance incentives for teachers that are good. I don't see, if we can give a bonus to Wall Street, I don't see a problem with giving incentives to teachers to go in trouble areas. I don't see a problem with reviewing some teachers. I think that you've got to make sure that you're not union busting and just trying to end the teachers' unions. But I think that you've got to also deal with, which is one of the reasons why I'm so upset that they've taken education out of the economic stimulus package. You got to put more funding there. You have to put more funding, you have to give more resources, you have to pay teachers more, and you have to set achievable goals. I have no problems with national standards if they're achievable and they're teaching, but the kids should not be just taught to pass a test. We've got to be able to measure that they are in fact learning beyond just what's on the test.
Thank you.
My name is Teek. I'm from Middlebury. And someone took the first half of my question, but the second half would be the gap between politicians and activists. Do you think that's inherent or something that could be, that our generation can close the gap on?
I think that it is not an absolute. I think there are times that activists and politicians can work together. I think there are times that they will not. I think they are two different defined roles, but they can walk hand in hand under certain circumstances. There was a time, I talked about Lincoln, there was a point that Lincoln and the abolitionists walked together because they had common interests, but they didn't lose their identity. He understood he was a politician, they understood they were abolitionists. So I think as long as I don't have to sacrifice who I am, I can walk with anyone, and I suppose they would feel the same way. I don't think that there is necessarily a need to always be in lockstep. I think sometimes it becomes a check and balance that's healthy for the country.
Do you ever think an activist can become a successful politician or a politician can become a successful activist?
Yeah, I think both are very possible. I think that it though lends itself to limitations. Like there are some activists that have become politicians, but they can't go beyond certain offices because the higher the office, the more consensus you need. There are some politicians that become activists, but they will sacrifice going higher up because there's certain consensus you need. So there are trade-offs in anything, but I think it's possible, yes.
Good evening, Reverend. My name is David Pudito. I'm from Rhode Island. And my question is, in your speech tonight, you talked about Abe Lincoln. And it was Abe Lincoln who said that America is to serve as the last best hope, basically, for the world and, you know, sort of some sort of beacon for the world. And I'm wondering if your intervention in these singular civil rights incidences serves to, I guess, fulfill a desire to see a better world or a better country within a better world. How does that
I think
division
that
work?
both. For example, if you think of the civil rights fights of the 50s and 60s, they took individual cases to change the law. You know, Rosa Parks was a specific incident, but it ended up leading to Civil Rights Act of 64. Abner Louima was a specific incident, but it changed policing in the city that was duplicated, the city of New York, that was duplicated by other cities. The New Jersey Four, those 4 young men shot on the highway in New Jersey, we used that to put racial profiling laws on the books all over the country. So one of the reasons we're careful on which cases we pick up, I won't fight a case unless we can use that for an overall reformation in the country and therefore the world. How does it affect the world? Because if you have like racial profiling laws that we put in the books after New Jersey 4, Johnny Cochran and I led, helped also in terms of defining that profiling all over the world. One of the problems we had was people from the United Nations in the global community were being profiled in New York till we put those laws on the book. How do you think we look to the world when their sons are going to school in New York because they're a UN ambassador working the Council General's office and they're being pulled over because of the color of their skin. So we do it for both, to deal with the individual case, but for the, also for the far-reaching redeeming quality that it does for society.
Thank you.
My name is Dan Rosemarin from Massachusetts. I'm wondering if you ever think it's appropriate to have a violent reaction or protest.
No, I personally do not support violence. No, I don't think that it is appropriate. I know this is something that I argue with a lot of activists about. I think that if you become what you're fighting when you become violent, in my judgment. Go ahead. Don't listen to him. I'm going to hear.
This will be the last question. Tomorrow evening at the Juice Bar at 7 p.m., there will be a panel on student reactions to tonight's proceedings. Thanks, you all.
Hi, my name is Rich. I'm from New Jersey. And before I ask my question, I just wanted to let you know that we have the same birthday. And
I didn't hear what he said.
Hmm?
So could you say it again? I didn't hear.
We have the same birthday. I just wanted to let you know, because no one I don't know has ever come into a room and told me that. But my question for you is not.
That was
related.
pretty good, by the way.
Yeah. I just wanted to know if you have ever been put in a situation where you talked a lot about, as a public figure, you go forward and you fight for things based on your own convictions, and I was wondering if you've ever been put in a situation where you fought for something, your convictions have changed, or the fight which you have fought has caused sort of undesirable consequences that you sort of
I've
didn't
been
foresee.
in situations where I have not changed my conviction, but where I've said later, we could have done that better, we could have done that differently, that our style got in the way of our purpose. I have come to, I'm the biggest critic of myself in terms of tactics and in terms of strategies. And I think as you mature, you should always have the ability to review and say, I could have done that differently. So for example, I've gotten involved in cases, I can't think of any case I would not have gotten involved with, but I can think of how I would have done them a lot differently as I've grown. And I've tried to improve how you do things. I don't think you have to be as antagonistic. I think that when I was starting, I had an attitude of most people are not going to support us anyway, so be abrasive. And as you get older, you learn there are going to be always those against you. There's always going to be some for you. But there's a big middle ground that you do a disservice to the cause by not trying to consciously appeal to them to see the cause, not you. I think public figures all have egos. We have huge egos, and sometimes we put our vanity in front of the issue. I think you need ego to drive you to get out of bed in the morning and do this. But when the ego becomes more important than the issue, then I think you do a disservice to the cause.
Okay, thank you.